Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Sunday. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Sunday, Yom Rishon? Stephen in New Hampshire. Renee in Indiana. Melissa in Great Neck. Shandora in the Bronx. Bella in Florida. John in Maine. Paula in the Great Northwest. Joe in the Inland Empire, Guy in Ohio, Sharon in New Jersey, Tom in PA, Bill in mid-Missouri, Karen in Northern California, Yehud in South Carolina, Lorraine in Texas, Nancy in North Carolina, Lucy in Minnesota, Gail in Kansas City, Ella in Southern California, Aoife in Florida, Spencer in Connecticut, Marie in Freeport. Welcome, everybody. Great to be learning with you. Our class tonight is sponsored by Paula Lee in honor of Michael Ben Donald, or Michal Ben Donald. Paula, may Michael and you and all your loved ones be showered in blessing. Thank you so much for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. And in that merit, may you be lifted up and showered in blessings. And we all say, Amen. Our daf today, excuse me, just a scratchy throat. Time of year, got the allergies, is page 63, which we're picking up at the bottom of page 62b. We are continuing our discussion of the prohibitions and consequences for the transgression of idolatry. Right at the bottom of 62b, and this is a discussion of Mishna number 8 here in chapter 7 of Tractate Sanhedrin, 24th volume of the Talmud. The Gemara discusses the matter itself, namely whether one who engages in several forms of idol worship in the same lapse of awareness brings more than one offering. Now we're at the top of 63a, and recall that yesterday we were comparing this to the prohibitions on doing work on Shabbos, where if first of all, you violate Shabbos intentionally, knowing it's Shabbos and doing something that you know is prohibited on Shabbos, so you don't bring a sin offering even when the temple is standing. Sin offerings are brought for unwitting transgressions, unintentional transgressions. But then there was the difference between, well, what is it that you were unaware of? Were you unaware that it's Shabbos and you did a bunch of different prohibited labors? Then you'd only bring one sin offering. Or were you you knew it was Shabbos, but you were unaware that these things are prohibited on Shabbos? Then you would bring a sin offering for each of the categories that you violated. And then we said, well, can we, by analogy, extend that to the different categories of idol worship, right? Where it's prohibited for a Jew to worship an idol in any form, whether it's by bowing or sacrificing an animal or burning incense or any kind of honoring the idol. So if you did that all in one lapse of awareness where you didn't realize that what you were bowing to or sacrificing to was an idol, like where you thought a building was a synagogue, but it turned out to be a house of idolatry, but there maybe it's not idolatry at all because he thought he was honoring God, or is it that he forgot that these things are prohibited? And so then are we going to say it's one offering because it was one lapse of awareness, or are we going to say since he did different rituals, all of which are prohibited, it would be a separate offering for each of them? So Rabbi Ami says at the top of 63a, if one sacrificed an animal as an idolatrous offering and he burned incense and poured a libation, all in one course of one lapse of awareness, he is obligated to bring only one sin offering. We saw yesterday that Rabbi Yochanan totally disagrees with that. He would have said multiple sin offerings, but Rabbi Ami says one. Abaye says, what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Ami? The verse states, quote, nor worship them, at Exodus 20, verse 5. So the verse renders all of the various rites of worship as one rite, R-I-T-E, according to Abaye. So the Gemara asks, wait a minute, and does Abaye actually say this? But doesn't Abaye say, why are there three mentions in the Torah of the prohibition against bowing to an object of idol worship? If the Torah said it once, we would know it's prohibited to bow to any kind of an idol. It says it 3 times. So we're going to learn some additional law from each of the 3 mentions. Namely, the prohibition against bowing to an idol appears 3 times. You shall not bow to them nor worship them, at Exodus 20, verse 5. You shall not bow to their gods nor worship them, at Exodus 23, verse 24. And for you shall bow to no other God, at Exodus 34, verse 14. Right? Same prohibition, slightly different wording, 3 different verses. So we're going to learn out 3 different things. What are we learning out? The reason is that one mention is for an idol, for which bowing is its standard manner of worship. The second mention is a prohibition against bowing to an idol, even if bowing is not its standard manner of worship. As we saw yesterday, that the idol Baal Peor, very weird idol, weird cult in ancient times, they would honor their idol by defecating in front of it. So if a Jew bowed to that idol, he would not be worshiping it in its normal manner of worship. But bowing to something, it shows respect to it, and if you show respect to an idol, you would have violated this prohibition. So if bowing is the standard form, prohibited. If bowing is not the standard form, prohibited. That's the first 2 mentions. And what about the third? And the third mention is to divide idol worship into categories, as one is obligated to bring an offering for every type of worship that he performed. So if in one lapse of awareness he forgot that it's prohibited to bow to an idol, to burn incense for an idol, to pour a libation of wine before the idol, and he did all those 3 things, because bowing is mentioned that 3rd time, it's to teach us that bowing is one of the categories. All of the categories are considered individual categories. It's not if you engaged in any kind of worship, it's all lumped together. Rather, the Torah is listing them as, or telling you that they are to be thought of as separate, distinct categories. And therefore, if in one lapse of awareness you did these 3 different things, unwittingly, you would have to bring 3 separate sin offerings for that. So apparently, Abaye does hold that you have to bring separate sin offerings, and he doesn't agree with Rabbi Ami that you would bring 1 sin offering because it was 1 lapse of awareness. So how do we square this? Since it seems that Abaye agrees with Rabbi Ami and now it contradicts Rabbi Ami. And the Gemara answers, Abaye stated his reason in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Ami, but he himself does not hold accordingly. He could explain and teach a view that was opposite his own view, which demonstrates the civility and wide, expansive learning of our sages. Now, the Gemara discusses the matter itself when Abaye says, why are there 3 mentions of the prohibition against bowing to an object of idol worship? One is for the idol, one is for an idol for which bowing is its standard manner of worship. One is for a prohibition against bowing to an idol, even if bowing is not its standard manner of worship. And the third mention is to divide idol worship into categories. So the Gemara asks, why is a verse necessary for the prohibition against bowing to an idol, for which bowing is its standard manner of worship? That prohibition is already derived from the verse, quote, take heed to yourself that you not be ensnared to follow them, saying, how do these nations serve their gods? So I will do likewise. Right? God has already taught us in a separate verse that doesn't mention bowing that we should not go after the gods of other peoples and worship them the way they do. So if bowing is the normal way, that would certainly be included in that verse, right? Which indicates that one is liable for worshiping an idol in the manner that the Gentiles worship it, which would be the standard manner that that idol is worshipped, right, by its followers. So rather, Abaye's statement should be understood as follows. One mention of the prohibition is for an idol for which its typical manner of worship is similar to bowing, in that the idol is worshipped in an honorable manner, right? That you're somehow honoring the idol, even if not specifically by bowing. But one which bowing is not its typical manner of worship. And the second mention is a prohibition against bowing to an idol, even if it is not similar to its standard manner of worship at all. And the third mention is to divide idol worship into categories. New subject. The Mishna, our Mishna number 8 here in chapter 7, includes among those liable for violating idol worship, one who declares that he accepts an idol upon himself as a god, and one who says to an idol, you are my God. Meaning they haven't worshipped the idol, they have just said, this idol is, God forbid, this idol is my God, right? Or somebody says that he is accepting that idol as his God. He hasn't bowed to it, he hasn't brought a sacrifice, he hasn't taken any other actions than saying these words. That he, with his words, is accepting that idol as his God. According to our Mishnah, he's already committed idolatry. Rav Nachman says that Rabba Bar Avu says that Rav says, once a person said to an idol, you are my God, he is liable, even if he did not worship it. The Gemara asks, the transgressor is liable to receive what punishment? For saying that the idol is his God, what is his punishment? Is it the death penalty, the standard punishment for actually doing actions that worship an idol? Or is it going to be lashes for violating a prohibition, or is it something else? And the transgressor is liable to receive what punishment? If he is liable to receive the death penalty, Rav's statement is superfluous, as this is stated in our Mishnah already. So rather, Rav means that one who does so unwittingly is obligated to bring a sin offering. Okay, so the Gemara asks, and is this statement true, even according to the opinion of the rabbis, the majority? But isn't it taught in a Baraisa, one is obligated to bring a sin offering for unwitting idol worship only for a matter that involves an action? For example, sacrificing an offering, burning incense, pouring a libation, or bowing. And Reish Lakish says, who is the Tana who taught bowing among these examples? It is Rabbi Akiva, who says that we do not require a significant action in order to render one liable to bring a sin offering. A minimal action is sufficient. Right? So according to Reish Lakish, bowing is a much less significant action than bringing in a sacrifice, making a sacrifice, pouring a libation, or burning incense. Makes sense. Those require, other gadgets and more actions and other materials. Takes more time, more intention, more everything than simply bowing. But bowing is an action. But it sounds like Reish Lakish is saying, well, bowing is an action, but it's a much less significant action. Okay. By inference, the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Akiva maintain that we do require a significant action. If bowing is not considered a significant action, then all the more so, speech alone is not considered a significant action. And so one who just said about an idol, this is my God, he hasn't even bowed. All he did is say words. Words are wispy nothings. Why would he be guilty of this of violating this prohibition and subject himself to a punishment? Or if it was unwitting, it would be necessary for him to bring a sin offering. Why isn't he fully exempt? Because all he did is say words. And the Gemara answers, Rav 2, when he states that one who says to an idol, "You are my God," is obligated to bring a sin offering. And he states this according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So apparently Rabbi Akiva, who has this lower threshold where you would have violated the prohibition, either by mere bowing, which is less of an action than burning incense, pouring a libation, or bringing a sacrifice, would sort of bring his barrier, for tipping the scale into guilt for this, even down to saying mere words. And the Gemara asks, if Rav states this according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, isn't it obvious that the transgressor is obligated to bring a sin offering? This is identical to the law of a blasphemer, whom Rabbi Akiva obligates to bring an offering despite the lack of an action. Now the Gemara answers that Rav states this lest you say that Rabbi Akiva obligates one to bring an offering for a transgression that does not involve an action only in the case of a blasphemer, as it is written explicitly with regard to a blasphemer that he receives kares, excision, death at the hands of the heavenly court. In the verse, quote, he blasphemes the Lord, and that soul shall be excised, nikreta, that's the penalty of kares, from among his people, excised from among his people, at Numbers 15:30. But here, with regard to one who, through his speech, accepts an idol as his God, where kares is not written explicitly, one might say that he is not obligated to bring an offering. The case of the blasphemer and the case of the idolater are not the same. Therefore, Rav teaches us that he is obligated to bring an offering, as the Torah compares the acceptance of an idol as a god to a case of active idol worship. And where does the Torah do that? As it is written, Exodus 32, verse 8, they have made themselves a molten calf, and have bowed to it, and have sacrificed to it, and said, these are your gods, Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Exodus 32, verse 8, the incident of the golden calf, a national disgrace and a terrible, terrible memory for our people. Now, with regard to the aforementioned verse, Rabbi Yochanan says, were it not for the vav in the term, quote, which brought you up, right? When they made the golden calf, and the ones who were behind that said, this is your God who brought you up out of Egypt. I mean, it's just, how could that have happened? How could that have happened? It was manifestation of God, pillar of fire, pillar of cloud, the 10 plagues, splitting of the sea. And this was after the giving of the 10 commandments. The actual, the strongest manifestation of God's presence ever. And then they say this statue made of gold brought them out of Egypt. It's ridiculous. Now, what people will say, and I'm going to discuss it here, is not that these people thought that they were making a god out of that golden calf to worship. What they were saying is Moses has disappeared. Moses was our intermediary between us and God. We're not able to hear God's words ourselves. We needed a prophet to do that. We followed Moses out here into the wilderness. Moses went up on top of the mountain to get the Torah. He said he was going to be back, either soon, or he actually said in 40 days and 40 nights. And the 40 days and 40 nights have passed, and Moses hasn't come back. And the people freaked out, and what they built the calf for was to replace Moses, not to replace God. But, nevertheless, they built this statue to somehow be involved in their worship of God, presumably, but still, we don't have statues involved in our worship. So it was, close enough to idolatry that was terrible. And God was furious. And the first tablets got smashed. And there was a plague broke out among the people. And many people died. And the Levites had to slaughter a bunch of people who were, involved in an orgy around this calf. It was terrible. So, related to that incident, Rabbi Yochanan says, were it not for the vav in the term he'elucha, right? The words which brought you up, which gives it a plural form, right? Which brought you all up, as opposed to which brought you, singular, up. Were it not for this, the haters of the Jewish people, and as you probably guessed if you've been with me for a while, the haters of the Jewish people is who? We're not talking about anti-Semites. We're not talking about the Jew haters among the nations. In this context, when we say the haters of the Jewish people, we're talking about Jews who lost their way. Not all the Jews, obviously, but Jews who become enemies of the Jewish people. Jews who, by their behavior, impact strongly, negatively, hurt the Jewish community through their actions. And so euphemistically, we call them the haters of the Jewish people, but we're referring to this small group of Jewish people who totally went awry. And so if it was not for the vav in this term that rendered, which brought you up from singular to plural, God would have destroyed them, right? We're not for giving it the plural form. We're not for this. The haters of the Jewish people, a euphemism used to refer to the Jewish people themselves, would have been sentenced to destruction for their idol worship. Since they recognized that God had taken them out of Egypt and thought that he had merely made the golden calf his partner, the Jewish people were spared, right? So they didn't just say there's no God. They said, no, we get it. God brought us out of Egypt. But now we're going to use this golden calf as God's partner in the same way that perhaps Moses was a partner for God. Not, obviously, Moses was a holy person, but he wasn't a deity of any kind. He was just a man that God chose to convey his word. Now, the Gemara comments, Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is like one side of the following dispute between Tanaim. Others say, were it not for the vav in the term, he'elucha, which brought you up, the haters of the Jewish people would have been sentenced to destruction. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said to him, but isn't anyone who links the name of heaven and something else, a euphemism for an idol, uprooted from the world? As it is stated, he who sacrifices to the gods, save to the Lord only, shall be utterly destroyed. So the fact that the Jewish people included God in their idolatrous statement could not have saved them from destruction, right? Even though they were still, honoring God and saying God brought them out of Egypt, the fact that they ascribe any kind of deification, any kind of sanctity to an idol, even alongside of God, they're saying, that's enough. They still committed idolatry. And if they all participated in that, the entire Jewish people would have been destroyed. God forbid. So rather, what is the meaning when the verse states, which brought you up in the plural? The verse teaches that the Jewish people desired many gods. They were not satisfied with the golden calf alone. Again, it was not the whole population. Please thank God. But there were enough of them that participated in this sin. Okay, so let's keep going. But it's worth just noting that sometimes people will be like, respect all people, respect, everybody's beliefs. Everybody has their own truth. Okay, we don't hold by that. We don't. We are taught by our tradition, by the Torah, there is one God, there is only one God. He is our God. We honor only one God. We don't accept any concept of multiple gods. And for a Jew to accept that in any way is a transgression of this prohibition. Therefore, if, you might be tempted to, make some kind of a statement in some kind of a context where, just to show respect or love or fear, as we were talking about yesterday and the day before, to someone by including their pagan deity in some statement of yours and somehow elevating that false pagan deity alongside, God forbid, Hashem, you would have committed this violation, even though you weren't only, ascribing sanctity to the idol, you were still remembering your own God, or God. The fact that you mentioned this idol alongside of God doesn't save you from the transgression of idolatry. Okay, new subject. Now the Mishnah teaches, but with regard to one who hugs an idol, so back to Mishnah number 8 here in chapter 7, with regard to one who hugs an idol, or one who kisses it, or one who cleans it, or one who sprays water before it, he transgresses a prohibition, but is not liable to receive capital punishment. Right? He's showing affection for the idol, but he's not honoring it the way that you would honor an idol, that you would worship an idol. He's just showing affection for the statue. So has he committed idolatry was the question. But with regard to one who hugs or kisses or cleans or sprays water before it, he transgresses a prohibition. He's done something wrong, but it's a rabbinic prohibition. He's not liable to receive capital punishment. He's kind of come too close to idolatry, but he hasn't actually committed idolatry. So he would not be liable to the death penalty. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said that Rabbi Lazar says, for all of these actions, one is flogged, with the exception of the cases stated later in the Mishnah of one who vows in the name of an idol and one who affirms his statement by an oath in its name. An oath or a vow, but still using the name of the idol to lend, weight and credence and even sanctity to a statement sounds like idolatry, right? So that sounds like that's going to be a stronger type of statement, a stronger type of action than just showing affection to the idol by kissing or hugging it. Now the Gemara asks, what is different about these cases? One who vows in an idol's name and one who affirms his statement by an oath in its name, that the transgressors are not flogged. So not flogged meaning they're fully exempt, or not flogged and therefore liable to the death penalty. Unclear. Now it is because they are each an example of a prohibition that does not involve an action. Kissing and hugging is something you do with your body. Affirming or vowing, that's just words. So it sounds like it's a lower level transgression, so not even flogging. Okay, but let's keep going. It does not involve an action. And these actions too, namely hugging or kissing an idol and the like, are not punishable by lashes. One who performs them, for all, yeah, right. So let me just go back. The Gemara asks, what is different about these cases? One who vows in an idol's name and one who affirms his statement by the oath of who affirms his statement by an oath in the name of the idol, that these transgressors are not flogged. It is because they are each an example of a prohibition that does not involve action. Okay, but then these actions, hugging, kissing, etc., are also not punishable by lashes. And one who performs, but for a different reason, not because they're not actions, they are actions, but one who performs them violates a general prohibition, right? They didn't commit idolatry. So if you're violating a general prohibition rather than a specific prohibition, sounds like the punishment is not lashes. It's not flogging. Rather, you're exempt from that kind of a punishment. You've committed a transgression. You need to atone for it. But lashes wouldn't be appropriate. Why? Because it's a general prohibition. What's a general prohibition? A general prohibition is one that contains several specific prohibitions within it. As this principle is taught in a baraisa, from where is it derived that one who eats from an animal before its soul departs? Right? So you're slaughtering an animal and then you're going to eat it. So that's permitted. right? But you have to wait until the animal is fully dead before you can do that. So if you're kind of in a rush and eat some of that animal before it has fully died, you have violated a prohibition. How do we know? The verse states, you shall not eat with the blood. Leviticus 19:26. Meaning, you shall not eat from the animal while its soul, which is referred to in the Torah as its blood, is still within it. And the Baraisa now adds, another matter is derived from the verse, you shall not eat with the blood. And now we're going to go on a little bit of a digression for a bunch of other teachings that are going to be based on this same verse. You shall not eat with the blood. Another matter, you shall not eat the meat of an offering while its blood is still in the bowl, as it has not yet been sprinkled on the altar. The meat of an offering may be eaten by the priests only after its blood is sprinkled. Right? The chatas, the sin offering, its procedure is after it's slaughtered, that some of the meat is set aside and the priests will eat from that, from the sin offering, but they can't eat of it until the blood that was drained from the animal and some of it is taken to the altar and sprinkled there. Until that part of the ritual has been completed, the priests may not eat from the sin offering. And another matter that we derive from, you shall not eat with the blood. That's the one I just said. Yeah. So the Baraisa continues. Rabbi Dosa says, from where is it derived that although in general, after a deceased person is buried, the mourners are provided by others in the neighborhood or in the community with a meal, those others do not provide the mourners with a meal after the burial of those who are executed by the court, right? So when somebody dies and his family is in mourning, the community brings them a meal. But if the one who died because he was a criminal who was executed, then the community does not bring a meal to the mourners. How do we know that? The verse states, you shall not eat with the blood, which is interpreted to mean you shall not eat a mourner's meal after the burial of one who was executed. It's almost like an additional awful suffering for the family of one who becomes a criminal, right? Not only do they lose their family member who was executed, but they're going to have to live with the shame and the pain that the person died because he committed a terrible crime. And they're not going to get a mourner's meal because of it. And furthermore, Rabbi Kiva says, from where is it derived with regard to a Sanhedrin that killed a soul, i.e. that sentenced a person to death, that the judges may not taste anything that entire day that they sentenced him? The verse states, you shall not eat with the blood. Rabbi Yochanan says, from where is the prohibition against the behavior of a stubborn and rebellious son derived? While the Torah states the punishment given to a stubborn and rebellious son, the prohibition against his actions, namely stealing money from his parents in order to eat a gluttonous meal of meat and wine in the company of lowly men, is not explicit. Well, the verse states, you shall not eat with the blood, which is interpreted to mean that one may not eat in a manner that is punishable by death. And this concludes the Baraisa. And Rabbi Avin Bar Chia says, and some say it is Rabbi Avin Bar Kahana who says this. For all of the prohibitions that the sages derive from this verse, one is not flogged for transgressing them, as it is a general prohibition that is referring to several different actions, right? All these different actions that are prohibited by you shall not eat with the blood makes it a general prohibition. Therefore, since the prohibition against hugging or kissing an idol is also derived from a general prohibition, it should not be punishable by lashes, and this is contrary to the opinion of Rav Dimi. So rather, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he related a different version of what Rabbi Elazar says. For all of the transgressions listed in the Mishnah, one is not flogged, with the exception of one who vows in an idol's name and one who affirms his statement by an oath in its name. And the Gemara asks, what is different about transgressing those prohibitions for which one is not flogged? It is that they are each an example of a general prohibition, as explained previously. These cases too, namely, one who vows or takes an oath in the name of an idol, are included in a prohibition that does not involve inaction, and therefore the transgressors are not punishable by lashes. And the Gemara answers, That law of Rabbi Eliezer is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says with regard to a prohibition that does not involve an action, that one is flogged for violating it. How do we know this? As it is taught in a Baraisa with regard to the Paschal offering, right? The lamb or the goat that we would slaughter at Pesach, at Passover, when the temple was standing. We no longer do that. The verse states, "And you shall not leave any of it until morning, but that which remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire." Right? So you have to eat that lamb that night. That's why we have a group of people registered to it. But if somehow it was too big an animal for too little of a group, or they got full or something else and there was some of that meat left over, okay, then in the morning you burn it. You don't leave it over and then eat some of it the next day as leftovers. No leftovers the next day from the Paschal lamb. If you do that, then you're violating this prohibition. Right? You shall not leave any of it until morning, but that which remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire. Exodus 12:10. Now this verse comes to provide a positive mitzvah to burn the leftover meat after the prohibition, right? Positive mitzvah, thou shalt do this. Prohibition, thou shalt not do such and such. Right? So here we have a positive mitzvah to burn the leftover meat after the prohibition against leaving it over was violated. And this teaches us that one is not flogged for transgressing the prohibition, as any prohibition that can be rectified by the performance of a positive mitzvah does not carry a punishment of lashes. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're on page 63b. Rabbi Yaakov says, my lips are so dry. Maybe that will help. It's funny, the weather very much changed in LA today. There was a wind, it didn't last that long, but now it's much more dry here. Okay, Rabbi Yaakov says this is not the reason. This is not for that reason. Rather, it is because it is a prohibition that does not involve an action. The transgression is simply the failure to consume all the meat during the allotted time, rather than the performance of an action. And one is not flogged for the violation of any prohibition that does not involve an action. Right? So they've been arguing on this. If you violate a prohibition that doesn't involve action, are you going to be flogged for that? Some say yes, some say no. Now the Gemara concludes, so by inference, Rabbi Yehuda holds that in general, one is flogged for the violation of a prohibition that does not involve an action, and therefore it can be inferred that one who vows or takes an oath in the name of an idol is liable to be flogged, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, even though no action is involved. Now you could... Oh, thank you so much, sweetie. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niv'ro. Now it's interesting because you could say, when you say "I do," do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, and you say "I do," most people would say you just took an action. You just got married. So words can very much be an action. Those are called performative words. But, and that would seem like, well, taking an oath, by an idol, or affirming words, or making a vow, by the name of an idol, sounds like it's an action. But in this discussion, they are distinguishing between an action, like bowing, bringing a sacrifice, pouring a libation, burning incense, and saying words. But it sounds like Rabbi Yehuda would say, though there may be some exceptions, generally you can be flogged for violating a prohibition, even if there's no action other than, even if there's no action, physical action. Okay, new subject. The Mishna teaches with regard to one who vows in the name of an idol and one who affirms his statement by an oath in its name, that this person is in transgression of a prohibition. We agree on that. We've been arguing about whether he's flogged for it or not, but we agree he violated a prohibition. The Gemara asks, from where do we derive that one who vows in the name of an idol and one who affirms his statement by an oath in its name has transgressed a prohibition? How do we know that? He didn't bow, he didn't burn incense. How do we know that making such a statement violates this prohibition? Gemara answers, as it is taught in a Baraisa, that the meaning of the verse, quote, and make no mention of the name of the other gods, Exodus 23:13, neither let it be heard out of your mouth, is that a person may not say to another, wait for me next to such and such an wait for me next to such and such an object of idol worship. The meaning of this statement, neither let it be heard of your mouth, is that one may not vow in the name of an idol, nor affirm his statement by an oath in its name, nor cause others, i.e. Gentiles, to vow in the name or affirm the statements by an oath in its name. I'm going to repeat that. Because what sounds like what they're saying, I want to see if did I actually just say that? You can incidentally mention the name of an idol. We've done it here, right? We talked about Baal Peor was worshipped by defecating in front of it. And, Mercury was worshipped by throwing rocks at it. So I said the names of those idols just to teach about them. Here they're talking about, can meet me by such and such a statue. Okay, well, you haven't somehow deified that idol. But if you say, I swear in the name of that idol, or I affirm that my statement is true by an oath taken in the name of that idol, then, you have lent some kind of sanctity or deification to that idol, and you have violated the prohibition. So did I say that? As it is taught in a Baraisa, that the meaning of the verse, quote, and make no mention of the name of the other gods, neither let it be heard out of your mouth. The meaning of this is that a person may not say to another, wait for me next to such and such an object of idol worship. The meaning of the statement, neither let it be heard out of your mouth, is that one may not vow in the name. So according to this, both teachings emerge from this verse. You can't vow or swear according to the idol, and also you can't just mention it and say, let's meet on the corner where that idol stands. Oh. Alternatively, the statement, neither let it be heard out of your mouth, can be interpreted as a prohibition against one who incites another to worship idols, and against one who subverts an entire city to do so. The prohibition against inciting others to engage in idol worship can be derived from this verse. So now the Gemara asks, why must the prohibition against an inciter be derived from here? It's already written explicitly in that regard in the verse concerning the punishment of one who incites others to idolatry. Quote, and all Israel shall hear and fear and shall do no more of any such wickedness as this in your midst. This is clearly a prohibition against inciting others to worship idols. So rather, the verse, neither let it be heard out of your mouth, is a prohibition against one who subverts an entire city to engage in idol worship. This prohibition is not stated elsewhere. The Baraisa teaches, and one may not cause others, meaning Gentiles, to vow in the name of an idol or affirm their statements by an oath in its name. And the Gemara comments that the Baraisa supports the opinion of Shmuel's father. As Shmuel's father says, it is prohibited for a person to enter into partnership with a Gentile. Why? Is it that we're somehow better than the Gentiles and we're not going to pollute ourselves by going into a business partnership with them? No, that is not what this is saying. What this is saying is you can't enter into a partnership with a Gentile because at some date down the road, you might have a litigation with him. And at that point, he's going to say, well, no, I know, I remember exactly what happened, and I swear by such and such that this is what happened. Now, he's not going to swear by our God if his God is some idol. He's going to swear by his God. But if he's swearing by his God, which is a form of idolatry, because he's in a litigation with us, then it would come out that we caused him to swear in the name of that idol, and then we would have violated this prohibition. And it's because it might come to that situation that Shmuel's father said, don't go into business with a Gentile, because that sequence of events could happen, and then you would come to violate this prohibition. Right? It's prohibited for a person to enter into partnership with a Gentile, lest their joint ventures lead them to quarrel, and his Gentile partner will be obligated to take an oath to him, and he will take an oath in the name of his object of idol worship. And the Torah states, neither let it be heard out of your mouth, which includes causing a Gentile to take an oath in the name of an idol. Now, interestingly, this law is no longer in force. Why? One should be careful not to enter into a partnership with a Gentile. This is the way the halacha is written out. As the Gentile might eventually be obligated to take an oath to him in the name of the idol, and the Jew will thereby transgress the prohibition of neither let it be heard out of your mouth, as stated by Shmuel's father. Nowadays, this matter is treated leniently, as most Gentiles believe in God and in the sanctity of the Torah, and they even include God's name in their oaths. Yeah, so people who hold by the Bible, we wouldn't have this problem if they were going to eventually come into a litigation with you. Whereas if you knew you were going into business with somebody who worships idols, then you shouldn't do it because of this situation. When Ula came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he lodged in a place called Kalnivo. And Rava said to him, and where did the master lodge? And Ula said to him, in Kalnivo. And Rava said to him, but isn't it written? And make no mention of the name of other gods. Kalnivo is the name of an idol. Ula said to him, this is what Rabbi Yochanan said, with regard to any object of idol worship that is written in the Torah, it is permitted to mention its name. Since one may mention the name of the idol while reading the Torah, it is permitted to mention it altogether. And Rava asked, and where is this idol written in the Torah? And Ula said, as it is written, Isaiah 46:1, Tanakh, not Torah, as it is written, Bel bows down, Nevo stoops. From that, it's pretty much the same thing as Kalnivo. So the Gemara asks, and does this mean that if an idol is not written in the Torah, it is not permitted to mention its name? Rav Misharshia raises an objection to this premise from a Mishna in Tractate Zavim 1.5. If a man saw, i.e. experienced, one gonorrhea-like discharge that lasted as long as 3 regular gonorrhea-like discharges, which is like the amount of time that it takes to walk from the location of the idol Gadion to Shiloh, which is the amount of time it takes to perform 2 immersions and 2 drawings with a towel, then he is ritually impure with the impurity status of a full-fledged Zav, even though a man generally becomes a Zav only after 3 separate discharges. We're not going to get into the laws of Ziva and Zava and Zavim, etc. What we're talking about here is that they were talking about experiences these 3 discharges within the same amount of time it takes to walk from one location to another, where one of those locations is the name of an idolatrous statue that the Greeks put in Jerusalem when the Greek Empire was ruling over the Holy Land. And now we're going to mention it, while we're spelling out another law that has to do with, with fundamentals of Torah law. Why would we mention an idol? And if we do, it must be that it's permitted to mention the name of an idol. You're not in any way glorifying it, but it was used as a landmark because, okay, there it was. We could judge that distance. So Ravina says the idol Gad is also written in the Bible. As it is written, they prepare a table for Gad at Isaiah 65:11. So we really haven't proven that you can, just mention the name of other idols without, again, you're not respecting them or sanctifying them. You're just mentioning it in conversation so that somebody knows what you're talking about, a particular landmark. Are we allowed to let that come out of our lips or not? And so here's the note from Rav Steinsaltz. That in Shel Yitot de Rav Achai Gaon, it is explained that since it is permitted to mention such an idol during Torah study, it is permitted to mention it for other purposes as well. And others add that the name of any idol may be mentioned for the sake of learning and discussion. For example, Mercury, that we mentioned a few pages ago. Okay, new subject. Rav Nachman says all types of mockery are forbidden, except for mockery of idol worship, which is permitted. It's very interesting. Mockery generally is prohibited. We should learn to refine our speech and not be people who mock others, who mock ideas, who speak sarcastically. That's prohibited speech, according to this, unless what you're mocking and demeaning is idolatry. As it is written, Bel crouches down, Nevo stoops, they crouch down together. They could not hold back the burden. Isaiah 46, 1 and 2. This verse is interpreted as meaning that they crouch in order to defecate and cannot retain their excrement. And it is similarly written, they speak, the inhabitants of Samaria shall be in dread for the calves of Beth Aven. For its people shall mourn over it, and its priests shall tremble for it, for its glory, kevodo, because it has departed from it. That's Hosea 10, verses 4 and 5. Do not read it as its glory, kevodo. Rather, read it as its burden, kevedo, meaning that the idol is unable to restrain itself from defecating. These are examples of derogatory statements that are permitted only in reference to idols. Maybe I overstated when I said we shouldn't mock or use sarcasm. Maybe what they're saying is don't engage in this kind of dirty talk, unless it's about an idol. Rav Yitzchak says, what is the meaning of that which is written? And now they continue to sin and have made for themselves molten images of their silver according to their own understanding, idols, all of them, the work of the craftsmen. Of them they say, those who sacrifice men kiss calves. Calves like a calf which they worship. Hosea 13:2. So what is the meaning of the expression according to their own understanding? Kitvunam. Idols. So the word kitvunam is interpreted as meaning according to their image, ketavnitam. And the verse teaches that each and every person would make an image of his God and place it in his pocket. When he would remember it, he would remove it from his bosom and embrace it and kiss it. Right? So it was a time in history when the nation had sunk very low. The prophet Hosea was sent to say, what are you doing? You people are all involved in idolatry. You're all carrying around these little idols in your pocket. You're so attached to it. What is the meaning of this statement? Those who sacrifice men kiss calves. Rabbi Yitzchak of the school of Rabbi Ami says it means that priests of idol worship would set their eyes on the wealthy, and they would starve the calves that were objects of idol worship, and they would make statues in the image of those wealthy people. And they would place those statues next to the troughs of the calves, and they would take those calves outside. And when the calves would see those wealthy people whose image they were used to seeing near their troughs, they would run after them and paw them. At this point, the priests would say to that wealthy person, the object of idol worship, the calf, desires you. Let the master come and sacrifice himself to it. And then the priests would inherit his property. Crazy sequence of events, right? That you have people so brainwashed that they would, jump at the chance to sacrifice themselves because a calf that they worship had come up and, pawed them. And it was a setup by the priests. It was fake, so that they could then get the property of these people. Rava says, no, that is not the correct interpretation of the verse, as the wording, those who sacrifice men kiss calves, is unsuitable for that interpretation, since in that case, the verse should have stated, they make calves kiss to sacrifice men. Rather, Rava says that the verse should be understood as follows. Whenever anyone sacrifices his son, his child, to an object of idol worship, the priest of idol worship says to him, the master has sacrificed a great gift, doron, to the idol. Therefore, he has the right to come and kiss the idol. The verse means that the reward of those who sacrifice people is to kiss calves, to kiss that object of idol worship. Rav Yehuda says, that Rav says, and by the way, this is all unimaginable to us, but it clearly was happening in the Holy Land, and God was infuriated by it. And he said that there's those people who were committing child sacrifice in the Holy Land have lost the right to live there. And then those are the nations that were driven out, conquered and driven out and destroyed by the conquest of Joshua leading the children of Israel into the Holy Land. Now, Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, with regard to the verse describing the peoples that were settled in Samaria by the Assyrians. All right, so that's much later. That's after you had, after King David and after King Solomon, and then the kingdom splits into the southern kingdom known as Judea and the northern kingdom known as Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel. And then the northern kingdom was defeated by the Assyrians, Sennacherib, and then they went into the exile, and then those are the lost tribes of Israel. And then the Assyrians brought other people to settle in the land. So that's what we're talking about here. So Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, with regard to the verse describing these peoples that were settled in Samaria by the Assyrians, quote, and the men of Babylonia made Sukkos Benos, 2 Kings 17:30. And what is this idol? It is the image of a hen, like a chicken. And the men of Cus made Nergal, that's 2 Kings 17:30. And what is it? It is the image of a rooster. And the men of Hamas made Ashima, 2 Kings 17:30. And what is it? It is the image of a bald billy goat. And the Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak in the next verse. And what are they? The image of a dog and a donkey. And the Sepharvites burned their sons and their daughters in the fire of Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of the Sepharvaim. And what are they? The mule and the horse. And why are they called that? A mule is called Adramelech because it honors Adar, its master, with its load, i.e. because it carries the master's load. And a horse is called Anamelech because it responds, Ane, to its master, assisting him in battle. So the Gemara relates that the father of Chizkiyahu, the king of Judea, who attempted to do so to him, right? Chizkiyahu was a righteous king, but his father was a very bad king and an idolater who brought idolatry into his kingdom. Terrible sin. And one thing that he did is he tried to sacrifice his son, the prince of the land, Chizkiyahu, to this idolatrous god. Right, the father of Chizkiyahu, the king of Judea, also attempted to do so to him, i.e. to burn him as an offering to an idol. But his mother rubbed him with the blood of a salamander, known as a salamandera, a creature created out of fire and immune to the effects of fire, whose blood is fireproof. And so Chizkiyahu survived. Rav Yehuda says, and I'm almost done, so questions or comments, please get them in now. Okay. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says the Jewish people knew that idol worship is of no substance. They did not actually believe in it. And they worshipped idols only in order to permit themselves to engage in forbidden sexual relations in public. Since most rituals of idol worship would include public displays of forbidden sexual intercourse. Let's unpack that for just 1 second. So first of all, idolatry was very often associated, it's not a joke, with orgies, with public lasciviousness, sexual displays. It was like they were told by the people who were worshiping those idols, hey, come with us, and then you will be considered a righteous person if you get your rocks off in this public and crazy, over-sexualized manner. And that was tempting to people, and so they went and did it. And it wasn't that they really believed that that statue was some kind of a god. but rather that by becoming one of the adherents of that cult, they would get to do what they wanted to do physically and indulge their lust. Now that human drive, that was not limited. Idolatry may be gone from the Jewish people and largely gone from the world. But that idea that people will create philosophies and ideologies that justify indulgence in their lust, that maybe is not so far gone from the world. Rav Misharshia objects to this from the following verse, Jeremiah 17:2. Like the memory of their sons are their altars, and their asherim are by the leafy trees upon the high hills. What does this mean? And Rabbi Lazar says that this means that the Jewish people would recall their idol worship like a person who misses his child. This interpretation indicates that they were truly attached to idol worship. It wasn't just to justify their lust. Actually, they really got into the idol worship and loved the idols and spent time philosophizing and learning and, really bowing before the idol with sincerity. The Gemara answers, this was only the case after the Jewish people became attached to idol worship, at which point they began to actually believe in it. But at first, they were drawn to idol worship only due to their lust. Again, you start engaging in a practice because it justifies your secret desires, then you get involved in the practice, and then you start to believe in the philosophy that you're spouting, but really you only got into it because of lust. The Gemara suggests, come in here, a proof that the Jewish people engage in idol worship for its own sake and not for the sake of engaging in forbidden sexual relations. In interpretation of the verse, Leviticus 26:30, and I shall cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols. The sages say that Elijah the righteous, the prophet, would search for those who were swollen with hunger in Jerusalem. And he once found a child who was swollen with hunger and lying in the garbage. And Elijah said to the child, from which family are you? The child said to him, I am from such and such family. And Elijah said to him, is there anyone left from that family? The child said, no one is left besides me. And Elijah said to him, if I teach you something through which you will live, will you learn it? And the child said to him, yes. And Elijah said to him, you should say every day, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The basic prayer of the Jewish people declaring the unity of God. The child said to him, shh. The child shushed Elijah the prophet when Elijah was trying to teach him the Shema. Why? So as not to mention the name of the Lord. See Amos 6:10. In other words, this child had been so indoctrinated into the ways of idolatry by his parents that he didn't even want to hear the mention of the name of God, which his father and mother did not teach him. And immediately, the child removed from his bosom his God, right? Some little idol. And he began hugging it and kissing it until his stomach burst from hunger. And his God fell to the earth, and he fell upon it in fulfillment of that which is stated, quote, and I shall cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols. This incident demonstrates that the Jewish people engaged in idol worship for its own sake. They became so attached to it that they even sacrificed themselves for it. And the Gemara answers, this also occurred after the Jewish people became attached to idol worship. Right? A Jew naturally cleaves to God and to Torah. But a Jew also has a tremendous passion and intelligence and creativity and desire for holiness. And if he becomes untethered from Torah, he will apply all that energy in the wrong direction. In ancient times, that would lead to idolatry. And then he would forge a strong connection to idolatry. And it would be impossible to break him away from it, like that child was evidence of it, right? And in modern times, same thing. This is, when we look at these tremendous, awful criminals, Epstein, Weinstein, other people like that, and we cringe. That's a Jew untethered from Torah who applied big intelligence and organization and, skill completely in the wrong direction, and then kept going and going and going and committed terrible, terrible crimes. If only all the Jews would keep themselves tethered to Torah, we would be so much better off. The world would be so much better off. Okay. A few comments. Bill, we say that Baal Peor idol had a strange cult, but something about it kept niggling at me, so I did a little digging to figure out what it was reminding me of. The Romans had a goddess of the sewers, Cloacina, the personification of the cloaca or cloaca maxima, the great drain, the main sewer of the city of Rome. And it became customary for Roman soldiers to offer prayers to her before they entered the latrine to avoid difficulties therein. And this is all by way of saying that possibly Baal Peor was originally prayed to for the health in the bowels, and then because idolatry seems inevitably to lead to somewhat ridiculous ends, that place that ends up is, well, as mentioned in the Da. Interesting. I bet you're right. Renee, also about Baal Peor. I used to pray during diaper changes for health of baby, of course, but also to help me encounter the contents with a better attitude. My mother of blessed memory opined that babies could sense energetically if we reacted with revulsion. So the Jewish prayers marvel at our openings and their genius, right? We say a prayer after we go to the bathroom, thanking God that everything is going well. And then we say that the body is filled with many passageways and cavities. And if but one of them were to be ruptured or but one of them were to be blocked, it would be impossible to stand before you, God, for even a moment, right? Our health would collapse immediately. And so it's thanking God for the miracle that our whole body is working, yet the whole GI system is working. Right? We take that for granted until something goes wrong. It's a really beautiful prayer, Asher Yatzar, after one goes to the bathroom. If you're Jewish and you don't do it, Google it, right? The bathroom prayer. We say it after we go, and it's a very beautiful prayer, and it increases your spirituality throughout your life. Karen, does that imply that a Jewish person can have a business relationship with a Christian but not with a Hindu? Sounds like. I'm not going to make any categorical, yes, that's what it says. And we also don't paskin halacha from the Gemara, right? So you'd have to check with a paskening rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi who's expert in Jewish law, or at least Shulchan Aruch, if it addresses this. But it did seem to say that generally we shouldn't get into business with non-Jews because we might come to force them to take an oath on their idolatrous God. And if that's not part of the picture, because they're not idolaters, then it seems like it might be permitted, and generally this law is ruled on leniently these days. But that seems to imply, right, because most people are not idolaters, especially in kind of, the Western world. But it does suggest that if you were that you should avoid getting into business with somebody who does worship idols. Sharon, Elijah does get sarcastic about the god Baal when its prophets could not get him to send down fire for the sacrifices. In fact, one of his sarcastic comments involved Baal possibly going to the bathroom. Yes, exactly. In that whole incident, Elijah versus the 400 priests of the Baal, and he absolutely humiliates them. And then I think they all get killed. Chaim in Florida, the second of the 10 Commandments begins with the prohibition of having other gods before God. Why is there any question at all about sin offering for having, regardless of acts of worship? I think what you're saying, Chaim, is why are we even doubting that just when somebody says this is my God about some other God than God, that we would have to, he wouldn't have violated the prohibition on idolatry until he actually bows or brings an offering. Sounds like once he states that, he has absolutely violated the second commandment. I think I think we saw views that would agree with you. And the Mishna agrees with you that once you say that, you have violated that prohibition. The question is, are you liable to the death penalty or to flogging? Is a different question, but definitely you have violated this. And the hour is very late, so we're going to stop there. That's what I've got. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Monday, regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific.